everyone, it's Sharonda from Payorwait, and today I'm going to be reviewing Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, which is currently playing in theaters. This film is directed by Christopher McQuarrie and it stars Tom Cruise, Haley Atwell, Ving Rhames, as this film centers around Ethan Hunt and his IMF team who must track down a dangerous weapon before it falls into the wrong hands. Which is like literally the plot of every single Mission Impossible film, but it doesn't matter, okay? Because I'm always going to be seated and ready to watch. So for those of you who are new to my channel, welcome, hello, so glad you came, I hope you stay. I'll tell you what I liked about the film, what I didn't like about the film, and should you pay or wait to see Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 in theaters. So going into what I enjoyed about this film, and honestly, honey, the reason that we go to watch the Mission Impossible films is because of Tom Cruise. This man is just like on another level of like dedication to the craft of film. From the death-defying stunts that he has, the charm that he has on screen, you just want to watch Tom Cruise in a Mission Impossible film. Like, that's what we're here for. And honestly, it's the stunts that elevate the films even more, and the fact that he's actually doing the stunts. When you're watching, I know you've seen the promo of him riding the motorcycle off the cliff, falling off the cliff. Like, we've seen that 15 million times. But when you're actually watching it in the theater, when you're watching him do this, I know you're watching the character Ethan Hunt, but honestly, in the back of my mind, I'm just like, I cannot believe this man really sat up here and did this over and over and over again, risking his life to make sure that he gets the perfect shot for the audience to have a memorable experience. And it's watching those stunts, knowing that in the back of your head, that makes you appreciate it even more. It gives it even more attention while watching it. And there's some pretty fun sequences that actually happen. Now, everyone's going to be talking about that moment, but there's also a very fun train sequence, which really falls back into why I've fallen in love with the Mission Impossible series, of these long moments, these moments that are quiet, and it's not like the booms, the explosions, and all these things happening. It's those like quiet moments and how it actually does. They do such a great job of building in on the tension. There's a train sequence that happens and it lasts for a very long time and most people will be tired of it. But because the tension is filmed so well, you literally feel like you are in the train car with them. Like your life is at risk. I'm like, hold on now. Like I'm clutching my pearls. I'm reaching in my bag for my inhaler. Like this is a little bit too intense. And it's those quiet moments that you feel it even more. And I really love what Christopher does in building the tension in these moments. Now, also, too, there's a fun airport sequence. But I want to give them props for a car chase that happens. Because people aren't going to realize how hard it is to drift in Italy in the narrow streetways on cobblestone, okay? It's already hard to drift because I have tried and I have failed multiple times. If you've ever done one of those driving experiences, honey, like I was fighting for my life the entire time. So to actually see them trying to drift, and I think it actually adds to the moment, because you can kind of tell Tom is like, hold on, like this is not what the car's supposed to be doing, but I'm going to go ahead and go with it. So I want to give them props for actually handling that sequence, because if you're doing something like that on cobblestone, it is very hard to actually control what the car is actually going to do. So I just wanted to give kudos to that. Now also too, there's a lot more comedy in it. I know what you're thinking, like, oh, it's Simon Pegg. Like, no, actually, like, there's scenes between Tom and Haley that are actually giving, like, these fun comedic moments. And I like that we actually get to see a lighter side of Ethan. It doesn't feel out of place. It doesn't feel like, oh, my God, they're trying so hard to do comedy. I think that it actually works with what's happening between both of these characters at that time. It's some fun sequences of Grace trying to get away from Ethan, to the point where I was just like, honey, just let her go. Because clearly this girl don't want to be found. So like, let's just keep it moving. But what I will say, let's get into some of the standouts outside of Ethan. I really like to see Simon Pegg in these movies, even though he adds to some comedic moments. There's some very heartfelt moments with him, especially his character in a scene when he has to answer something truthfully. I was like, oh my goodness, I want a friend. I want a friend like him because he's just so great. Benji is just such a lovable character. It's always great to see Rebecca Ferguson return. I've really enjoyed her arc the most over the past, from Rogue Nation to Fallout to now in Dead Reckoning. I think that she's one of the best female representation within the Mission Impossible franchise. Before y'all start getting on my neck, okay? I love Tanda Way as Naya in Mission Impossible 2. Y'all already know how I feel about Julia. Just couldn't get through with the damsel in distress type of thing. But I felt like Rebecca's character, Ilsa, is probably one of the best well-rounded characters where she gets to be fierce. She gets to be formidable. She gets to feel like a true equal to Ethan Hunt. and she doesn't have to sacrifice who she is, or she's not always in the need of rescuing. And I really love being able to see her progression. And it's just always a pleasure to see Rebecca Ferguson on screen. Now, Plum Clemente, I love her character as Paris. Even though my girl don't talk, I had to give a side eye for that. Even though her character doesn't talk, she a badass, y'all. Like, she don't care. She's very unhinged in this movie. I'm here for it. And it was to the point where I was like, dang, like, I know you're not like the big baddie of the film, but honey, like, you was carrying your own and I was here for it. I love seeing her do something different than Mantis from Guardians of the Galaxy. I really want to see her do even more kind of outside of the MCU. And I think that this was kind of like a nice installment with her character, even though I'm still side-eyeing y'all for having her barely say any words. But she was giving in all other aspects, all right? That's pretty much outside of, you know, the normal people, Benji and Luther. Like, you know, we always love them. They family now. But I have to say there are also some fun nods to the first film. One of the things that I do like about the Mission Impossible series is it does feel like a connected universe. They're always paying homage to the original, never forgetting characters who have come before. And I kind of like how they weave in those storylines. And we actually get a fun, you know, character in this series as well, who you may know for some of the previous films. And so I like that it always feels like a connected universe. And that's just always great to see. When you've had 7 films, I hate when they try to act like other films didn't happen. That irks my spirit. But I'm happy to say that for this franchise, they do a really great job of that as well. Now, even though I can go on and on about things that I really liked, I had some issues with Dead Reckoning, y'all. Okay, so just bear with me. I'm going to do a spoiler review because there's some things that I just need to spoil to actually be able to give my point on why I have an issue with it. But one of the things that I was just talking about is how we've had with Ilsa such strong female representation that I feel like we take 10 steps backwards in this franchise, in this movie. There's things that happen to certain characters, especially with Grace's character. While I love Haley Atwell and I thought that she did a fine job of what she was given in this film, I didn't necessarily gel with her character. While her character is a thief in this film and she can certainly hold her own, it felt like we were teetering between, do we want her to be like this strong badass woman, or do we want her to be a damsel in distress who needs to be saved the entire film? And I think that with the latter part, that ended up being most of her storyline for the rest of Dead Reckoning after we're first introduced to her. While she does have good chemistry with Ethan's character, while Grace has good chemistry with Ethan, I really hate that they keep trying to always introduce some type of romantic interest for Ethan. We're not here for the romance. We're here for, like, just give me action. Give me a good spy story. Like, I don't really care who Ethan like, who he's trying to smash, what he's trying to do, who he's trying to marry. I don't care, all right? And I really hate that they keep trying to do this. And honestly, most of the films that I don't necessarily care for. It always comes back to they were trying to make Ethan fall in love with somebody that we just met, and it didn't make sense, all right? Also, too, there's something that they do with a character, a beloved character, that they deserve to be thrown in jail for, and I would definitely talk about this in the spoiler review. But if you've seen it, you know exactly the moment I'm talking about, and when that moment happened, I completely lost interest in the entire film because it just didn't make sense. And that leads me to my biggest issue with Dead Reckoning is the story. I know what y'all thinking, Sharana, we're here for the action, we're here for the stunts. But honestly, this story it's just a mess. It's just a bloated mess. They spend a lot of time with exposition of utilizing dialogue to continue telling the same story. There's this AI technology, and this key cannot fall into the wrong hands. And for the 3-hour runtime, we were literally told the story over and over and over and over and over again, to the point where we have a good introduction with how this technology can, like, you know, be a hindrance if it falls into the wrong hands, or even if it is in the right hands. And I thought we were going to have more scenarios like that to really show how technology can be dangerous, not only for ourselves, but for the country as a whole. And they started off with it, and then they just never went back to it. And instead, they were just like, instead of us showing you what it can do, we're just going to tell you over and over again from different people. And we're going to be very vague, but we're going to be very, like, scary, like it's this huge threat. When I'm just like, so why do we have a 3-hour runtime if you're not going to actually show us what we should be afraid of, and why everyone is laying their lives on the ground to retrieve this key? It just didn't make sense to me. Also, too, I just felt like with some of the additions of the new characters, especially with Shea Wingham and Tarzan, Greg Tarzan Davis, I felt like they were the sorriest representations of agents. Like, I know Ethan is like Ethan, so it's gonna be hard to get somebody like Ethan Hunt. But I was like, honey, did y'all call in the B team? Did they just graduate? Like, this who y'all sent to go get Ethan Hunt of all people? I'm all here. I'm here for Greg getting the check because, you know, Tom loved working with him in Top Gun Maverick, one of the best movies of the year last year. But like, honey, I'm all for collecting the bag. But these characters were sorry. I didn't understand the purpose of them. Typically, and maybe it's because we're coming from Fallout, because that person who was supposed to have this oversight over the IMF team, where we had like Henry Cavill's character, maybe because we're coming from like Fallout, which was like, I was like, dang, like, okay, I don't think I would want this to be the person that's going to be on my tail the whole time. Maybe that's why I didn't really connect with their characters, but they just felt kind of useless. And I feel like we kind of didn't even utilize our villain of the entire movie, Gabriel, played by Asai Morales, who is just like fantastic and fine. Sorry, I just had to throw that in there. But I didn't really vibe with him, and I know there hasn't been a good villain since Philip Seymour Hoffman. I get it, but we can at least try to attempt to do something. But because we're so vague on the story, and because we're so vague on what the actual AI threat is in Dead Reckoning, it doesn't allow Gabriel to be a formidable villain. And maybe we'll see more in part 2. But because the story is so dense, and there's a lot happening, but there's no plot actually progressing, it made me feel as though, why did we actually need 2 parts for Dead Reckoning? And why did part 1 need to be almost 3 hours if you weren't going to tell us anything? So I felt very let down by the screenplay. And I honestly feel like Dead Reckoning is going to be like an MI2 issue. All right. Now, I know it's not as bad. It's definitely nowhere near as bad as MI2. But I loved MI2 when it came out in theaters. But when I recently did my rewatch, I was like, girl, what was you thinking loving this movie? It is over the top. But I feel like Dead Reckoning is going to be one of those films when you go back and do your rewatch of all the films before you go watch Dead Reckoning Part 2, I feel like you're going to change your mind on how much you loved or hated this film. So I would be very interested in a couple of years from now to see how people feel about Dead Reckoning. I think because the bar is set to the pits of hell of how good movies are, even with its flaws, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 is still a vibe. It's still a good time, all right? It's still entertaining. I stayed awake, and that is very hard for me to stay awake in a 3-hour runtime, and I was already sleep deprived before I got into the theater, and it started 30 minutes late. So that should let you know I stayed awake for it. So it's still entertaining. The story's going to need some work, and I'm going to need them to give me a little bit more in Dead Reckoning Part 2 to make me feel like Dead Reckoning Part 1 is justified. Right now, I'm on the fence, okay? But still, what I would tell you to do with you and your coins, I would tell you to pay go see Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 in theaters. I think for the regular moviegoers, the popcorn moviegoers, if you just want to watch a movie with great stunts, a lot of things happening, very great use of Dolby. One of the best uses of Dolby that I've seen in quite some time. I saw this in Dolby IMAX. I would tell you to pay to go see it in theaters. Now, if you sticklers on story, screenplay like I am, you might have some issues like me, but we're going to talk about it in the spoiler review this weekend. But for now, those are my thoughts on Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. As always, my name is Sharona from payorwait, and if you like what you saw today, make sure you hit the like button, hit subscribe, share this video with your friends, and make sure you hit that notification bell. And I love you guys 3000. And until I see you again, bye.